Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, where we are lucky enough to be joined by one of our industry experts from Enghouse Interactive, Peter Fedarb. Our session today is the case for automating agent evaluation, a session that I am sure has clearly piqued your interest, but also will allow you to interact and think about opportunities in your own environment. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us here today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes. And during that time, with the help of today's guest, we hope that the session provides some interesting insights into things that are in your control, into concepts that you may have been, just thinking about or actually exploring, and provides you with some more information that can actually help you within your own organisation. There will be a poll happening in our session today, so hopefully you get the timing for that one all right. But make sure you participate in that. That gives us some good intel and understanding of where you're sitting within that continuum. To round off the session, we'll have Q&A. But if you've got questions or thoughts or comments as we work through, as always, I encourage you to use the chat and the QA feature on your screen. If the content or the question is relevant to what's being talked about, I'll actually step in and we'll ask Pete as we go along. But if it's more general in nature, we'll keep that to the end. So I'm Fran Southward, CEO of Auscontact, and I will be your moderator for today. We'll just run through some general housekeeping with you. As I said, remember to interact with us. That maximises the benefits that you take away. And as you know, there's no need to take too many notes, as we will provide you with the recording of the webinar, and we'll also share some of those slides that Pete's going to take us through. As I said, use that QA button and the chat feature as often as you like. Don't save it up. If you're anything like me, I have a great question. If I don't write it down, I will forget it. So put it down. And as I said before, we'll step in with those questions if they're relevant to what's on the screen. If you are listening through headphones or speakers and have any issues with your connection, note on the control panel the raise hand button. If you click that, one of the team will jump in and try and help. Alternatively, you can revert to the email registration, which does have the dial-in numbers that you could utilise. So enough from me. I'd now like to introduce you to our speaker for today. Joining us today, we have Peter Fedarb, who is the Solution Engineer APAC for Enghouse Interactive. Now, I am going to say that Peter has just actually moved from the UK to New Zealand, and for the first time in a while is operating on the same time zone as he's actually in, or similar to. But Pete, I'm sure that already you're enjoying the new environment. But I'm going to hand over to you to give a proper introduction, and we'll get things kicking along.
Thanks, Fran. And I'm certainly enjoying the daylight hours rather than the night times I've been doing for the last couple of years. So it's certainly been a change. So what I'm going to do is share across a PowerPoint for everyone today. And as Fran said, if there's anything that you want to ask questions about, please do so as we move through the deck. And we do have a slot for the questions towards the end as well. So just sort of to understand where I come from, I've worked at Enghouse Interactive, which is a subsidiary of the Enghouse Systems, a division of. We do have lots of other divisions within Enghouse, but I live over here in Enghouse Interactive, and we mainly focus on contact center software and the tools around it. Our HQ is out of Canada, and we've been working in global format for many, many years. So I've spent the last 20 years in the UK and just moved across to our APAC offices in New Zealand. But I have been doing the job during COVID for the last couple of years. So at Enghouse, we produce, as I say, the contact center solutions, which could be everything to do with your omni-channel service, artificial intelligence, or recording and management and quality that we're going to be looking at today. But obviously, we do provide all the tools around there as well. So what we're really looking at today is the case for automating agent evaluation. And what we're really going to do is just so that if there's anybody that hasn't done an evaluation before, we're going to break a little bit that down for you. So if there's any questions you move along, tap them in and Fran will interject them as well. So typically within the contact center environment, we do the call recording, and that's what most people assume, that you're going to be listening to all your call recordings that's there. But on most modern sort of quality management systems, you're going to be recording the text as well within the system. So text would be things like emails, web chats, and SMS messages that could be coming in already in a text format. Obviously, quality management can also do other things for you, things like screen recording. So you can actually look at what's being entered in a CRM and also sort of look at what agents are actually doing in conjunction with the call. Are they entering the data incorrectly? So those are the components that are usually made up within the modern call recording platforms, or as we refer to them these days as quality management platforms. So why do people do these recordings? Well, lots of businesses have different use cases. You may have one or more of these use cases within there. Some people have a compliance and legal requirement where if you're doing things like selling, distance selling, that you may have some local legislation or global legislation that you need to apply to make sure that the rules are being followed properly and the advice your agent's given are in line with those sales practices that are there. You've also got the training and development, having your team, improving customer service with today's competition, making sure that your agents are well skilled and better than the competition. This is always key. The more better service that you get, the more customer retention you get, the loss of customers can hit the businesses quite hard. Quality assurance as well internally to make sure that you're following your own practices and procedures internally is quite key. Dispute resolution is the most common one, where people just want to make sure that they hold on to those conversations between an agent and a customer to make sure what was discussed, was it done properly? If there's any issues, you can reflect back on exactly what was said by both parties. Also, sort of as in the quality management, when you're looking at these tools, being able to look at the performance and measure that performance. Are things being done properly? Where are the problems? And that's really where we start looking more at the evaluation side. So what really do people do with the evaluation today? Well, it's really a process that people follow, and it's a very human process in sort of doing what we refer to as manual evaluation, where a supervisor has to set time aside to listen to each of the recordings. Actually, those conversations could be a 10, 15-minute conversation, so it burns quite a lot of time actually listening to it. Supervisors then are generally scoring those. So you normally set a questionnaire, if you like, with a scoring mechanism against it to say, did the agent undertake this process or did they conform to this best practice? And that could be a yes or no, quite a very binary choice, or it could be more of a 1 to 10 sort of rating, different ways of scoring that. But what you're really trying to do is to build up a picture of a percentage of how well that agent handled that call according to your internal processes and procedures. Supervisors tend to then have to reflect on what that feedback is and then devise how we're going to fix those problems. So this is all about discovering the problems that are there. And then we go into more corrective behavior by the supervisor actually coaching the agents, finding those weak spots in these areas, and then using that to train to make sure that your agents improve. And obviously, this is a constant process that's happening within the contact center. That's typically what the manual process of agent evaluation is. And most people are doing this. However, what they do find is they can't do everything they want to because of the time constraints that are happening in these red areas. That's really taking the supervisory time that's actually going to sort of chew into things and spending more time looking for problems than they are fixing the problems. That's really what today's discussion is about. So why people actually evaluate? To motivate agent performance, to improve that performance, to basically encourage agents if they know that they're being monitored and they're constantly getting that feedback, they get a chance to improve. And basically that will give the agents some motivation. They don't feel like they're just being left alone, that they're just getting on with how they want to do it. They're actually getting that encouragement in where they're doing well and also getting improvement in the places where they need to. Also, delivering more focus coaching and development. So, by understanding where your problems are, you can then target the weak areas. So, what am I going to bring up at next week's team meeting? What's the area that all of the agents are doing bad at? What can I pull the whole team socks up for? When we're looking at a one-to-one, we can target more at the agents level to say, okay, this is the particular areas that agents want to get better at. So it's really going to increase your agent and employees' engagement into that and their satisfaction to understand that they're doing a good job. You can take the time to say you do this well. And it's what we would refer to as in the olden days of contact center as sandwich love, the good and the bad. You have to give the positive and the negative feedback as well. And that really sort of helps them engage a little bit more with the processes that they're undertaking. Going to improve the customer experience, and that's really what we want, a better result for our customers to improve business and perhaps bring more business in from word of mouth referrals or good practices in keeping those customers. Quite often you might have compliance within the business that provides a risk, sometimes a financial risk, and obviously giving feedback internally to understand if that risk is being mitigated by processes and practices being followed correctly. We're going to obtain insights into the experiences that you deliver. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they positive? Are they not positive around that? So why do we find people not evaluating? It really comes down to one thing within most contact centers. And I've been working in the contact center industry for nearly 20 years. I've seen a lot of people starting with this, doing Excel spreadsheets over the time and moving more into the quality systems as well. The time and resource and the effort is the one thing about doing this en masse, is having that enough time in the day to find the problems and then to correct them, design training programs to bring about that change within the business. And it does take that time and it does take your resource. It's the one limiting factor. So we're going to go to a poll question now, if Fran could launch the poll for us all. What we're really interested in is where everybody is today. Do you currently do evaluation? Are you not evaluating at all? Are you doing some that's manual within there and that you want to cover more? Are you doing something that's 100% manual? Are you burning quite a lot of time doing that process? Maybe you have some compliance you're being very cautious around, perhaps in the financial industry, where you have to do that sort of full time. Or are you already using AI to do evaluations? So if we can get that feedback in from everybody, hopefully that should be able to give us some results from Fran. Are we getting much feedback there, Fran?
Yeah, we've got a few coming through and lots. I mean, probably for me, not surprisingly, the majority evaluating 100% manually, but interestingly, the highest response there is around evaluating manually, but want to cover more.
Mhm.
And, it's kind of what I hear a lot of around the traps that, sort of the time investment to have people sitting there manually doing it is one part of the equation. But the other thing is, their methods or their framework mean it's actually not random for a start,
Yep.
and it's very set at. Each month we do three. We'll assess three calls on a person. We've got people that sit there and do it, and there's such a personal component within there. It's quite people dependent on what the results are as well. So there's some of that there. So not surprisingly, 58% are saying that they're evaluating manually and want to cover more. And then there are some that are already using AI to evaluate, which is exciting to hear. So it'll be great to hear some more from there. And that's sitting at around 5%.
That's very interesting. I was expecting before, as we was discussing before, I was expecting that most would be in that sort of number two area. And I would have expected a little bit lower on number three for 100% manually evaluating. Might be
Mm,
interesting, as you say, that they're meeting 100% of what they feel they can do, as in that three evaluations a month. Perhaps that's sort of where that 100% may live a little bit more, because the number of calls are, you'd have to have that one-to-one sort of perspective for talk time for agents versus somebody checking them. So it's very
yeah.
unusual to hit that 100% level.
There's an interesting comment here, and it's from Katrina. Just says that she's selected option 4 as it's
Mhm.
the closest to what they use. So they've got Genesis QA. However, there's still some manual intervention required for some of that assignment and assessment post the initial analysis that's actually provided. So yeah, that's a really good point, Katrina. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. So we'll move on from the poll now. Poll questions pops up again. So the real number one reason that people are looking to automate it is to give 100% coverage. And this is where I sound a bit like a TV ad around the sort of number one reason is, but it is sort of the number one reason around automating it is to cover more than what you have, which is where that number two, everyone's done the manual one, but technology's been coming along for the automated AI. And this is the tool that really is going to help us cover more of that. As Katrina finds, though, not everything is there. There is still time where you're going to have to take around that feedback, as we'll see. But it's going to be reducing the amount of time we have to spend doing these evaluations. So as we sort of saw the motivations, if you like, around sort of doing the evaluations over this side by introducing the AI tool to it, we're going to be able to do this more en masse. We're going to be able to up our percentage by many, many times in getting the AI systems to do some of that legwork for us. What we're really looking to do is to increase the scalability and efficiency of this product. We all understand that evaluation is a good tool. It's going to help us. It's going to improve our customer service. But being able to do it on scale is the problem that everyone has, and doing it efficiently. The other thing that I've noticed with it where we've put it into place is its increased accuracy. If you're in a very large contact center working in somewhere, you've got hundreds, if not thousands of agents that's there. You may have more than one person actually doing the scoring. And no two people will interestingly score the same scorecard in exactly the same way. So you always had a little bit of disparity in the scores that were being received because you'd have the humans involved. And our perspective would be different on whether a target was met. Some people could be more generous, some people could be more harsh. So the accuracy and efficiency will improve with it as well.
Pete, it's
Operational.
interesting. Can I just ask, and Ned's put it a comment on there in one of the earlier slides. That point number one, motivate agent performance, but there was another call out in the earlier slide that was around engaging agents.
Yes.
And the question, or I guess the comment, is that does it really engage? Does it really motivate? Like, sometimes this is about there's a really challenging change program that needs to be applied here about how you communicate and then what you do with the information. So I think there's I think there's almost this view of the engaging and motivating component of the current state, which is about a whole lot of work that is focused on what's wrong in interactions, to your point around some of that current practice. And again, if we're saying that there's an opportunity here to actually introduce something that can be engaging and can motivate performance, maybe there's an opportunity to explore that a little bit more and what you're seeing when it is rolled out. Because again, conceptually, are you motivating agent performance, or is the fact that what part of it is it that actually challenges them to, or encourages and motivates them to perform better?
I think
That
the
isn't about
motivate.
more visibility. Yeah.
If you think of me coming into a new business as a trainee, that I'm being sort of, maybe a few weeks of training that's there, and then I may be left to my own devices. Having those one-to-ones where you're getting positive feedback about your real work and you're being told that you're doing something well or you're improving
Yeah.
actually does motivate that person. It makes them walk back to their desk. The next few calls they'll take will be a vast improvement, and keeping that encouragement up of contact, not just to say I'm sitting here doing the grind, but there's somebody actually telling me that I'm doing it well, that I'm improving it. Areas where I'm not doing so well, if I see an improvement from where I was failing at something to improving something. It's a bit like when you sort of go into a modern school, not when I was at school, teachers walk around and they tell children they're doing well, and it gives them that positive uplift. And agents can be very much, people are very much the same, giving that positive encouragement that somebody's grading your work and saying that you're doing right. And that's where that sandwich love comes in. It can't all be about the bad, it has to be about the good as well. You have to find that
Definitely.
balance.
So it's
Mm.
got to be balanced with that coaching capability and leadership application to actually get some of those great opportunities out of it.
Yeah, and you know, seeing the improvement and being told that you're improving is nothing but positive for people. And that also,
For
you know,
sure.
gives you, when you start to build up more time, as we see with the AI enabled, that you're going to have more time to do the good things rather than do the menial things. You'll be able to spend more time improving the agents, and that's what we're trying to get to. So if we was to look into things like the enhanced routing and reporting and visibility that we're going to get, the actual feedback loops that you're going to get out of these systems are actually going to enable you to quickly understand what problems are. So it's going to, again, free up a little bit more time around there. And you've got things like the operational flexibility as well, being able to launch this across a wide spread of different areas in the business and target different problems. It's going to allow you to look for things that you may not be looking for today. So, you know, dig a little bit deeper sometimes rather than do the same scorecard you've been doing for years. You may be able to branch off into different focus areas as well. So obviously we covered off the manual process where we had the listening to things, actually having to score it, actually having to review and understand where the problems lie. And when we start to look at what the AI is actually going to do, is the AI is going to actually review all of this information continuously. It's going to be, in effect, listening to the recordings. It's actually going to look for the right scoring that's there. Now, this little piece here, obviously, you know, you can turn technology on. Everyone thinks you just turn it on. It works. It takes a little bit of tuning. So, you know, it's not a technology you switch on day one and it's going to get 100%. But what you can do is to change the way you word your questions and those to get the best results out of the system that's there. So having a little bit of time if you're going to engage in a project like this to do a proof of concept, deploy it in there, but understand you're going to need to tweak it a little bit. Just how people say things and phrase things can be a little bit different. So getting the best out of it, I would spend a little bit of time in this section here to get that scoring going very well for you. And then basically the AI is going to complete all the scoring and flag the risk for you. This is where that sort of reporting and visual feedback is going to come important to you. So you can quickly glance rather than sort of try and unpack all of that knowledge to actually get that information. So we're turning all of these red sectors here to green sectors to say the AI is going to do most of this for you. Now, where Katrina may be saying that the additional time is coming in is you still need some time to review this and decide what you want to do about how you're going to tackle about it. To use things like training programs. Now, we do have other sort of, you know, training video content and sort of process programs that we sell as complementary systems where you can design your own training programs on the processes, the screen recordings, video tutorials. So you're not doing human training. You could assign training programs to people to help correct areas of problems that are there. There is a little bit of gap at the moment in the technologies going between these two sections. This exists as a technology, and this needs to be more an automated follow-up. But what you should really be able to do in the future is to design programs within this section here, maybe in some video content, and then for it to automatically assign. And those are the sorts of futures that we're working on there. So again, it's going to take a little bit of what I feel that sort of non-automated processes, there's still a little bit human at this point here. And I feel that's where that 100% went to mostly 100%.
Pete, there's a couple of good questions here and relevant to, you know, sort of that transition from operational, you know, manual components to the automated. And from Adam, he's just saying, can you provide some insights on the key challenges that organizations face when transitioning from manual to automated? And how can they be effectively addressed? And, you know, I guess, Adam, there's a couple of challenges there. One is actually building the appetite, but two is really having visibility. What is that transition period? What does it look like? And Pete, you touched on the fact that, you know, you've got to kind of, you know, skill up the system. You as a business have to actually design it to pick up what you want it to pick up. It'll keep learning from that. But actually,
Yeah.
there is some investment and some work and some strategic thinking, critical thinking at that initial stage that you almost need to translate into a new environment.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different sort of transitions that could be done. There's people that out there that don't do any scorecarding today that want to start doing it. And I always sort of say, if people are doing that before, they turn this on. Start at the manual process, understand what you want to grade and what is giving you that feedback. Do a few examples. If you're already doing this manual process, what we can really do is to immediately turn the AI on. We already understand what you want to score. You already have the questions, but they're written for your users to answer, not for the AI to answer. So what you may have to do is to spend a little bit of time rewording how you ask those questions. Was the company name used? Well, did you say the name Enghouse? Was the name Enghouse mentioned? Or do we need to target what we're looking for, products and brands? So sometimes you have to reword some of the questions that you're using so that the AI interprets them. So this is where it's good to turn on, but also do a little bit of both for a period of time
Mm,
so that you get the AI to score, but get somebody to double check the AI and then maybe change some of those questions for it to be a little bit more progressive around that, and keep a feedback loop going for a little piece of time just to make sure you're getting the best out of the scoring. Actually, turning the sort of transcriptions on and getting you to check the emails is the easy bit. That's a few clicks of a button normally. But actually getting that scoring to 100%, it needs a point of review. So I always like to say, put the technology in, turn it in, but then have bi-weekly reviews on it, maybe weekly reviews for the first couple of months to try and get the best out of this section until you're 100% happy. What then turns the focus to is once you're getting that feedback, is understanding that feedback. This is where you humans, you're going to get the feedback there, but you need to spend some time understanding it, picking
mm,
it apart, deciding how you're going to correct it. So it's good to get that tuned correctly and then decide, well, I'm getting all this feedback. It's a bit like when you turn reports on in the contact center, you've never had reporting before. You find all the problems, and sometimes
yeah.
that's not nice to see.
There's
But
definitely a teething period, isn't there? If you
yes.
think about the even just the volumes you would shift to from manual to automated, actually, some people are a little afraid of what that suddenly will, I say expose, but actually it's already there, right? It's just about giving you the steps and push to actually need to then address it in a different way. So I think regardless of organization or vertical, you will definitely have that transition period, which suddenly makes it seem a little overwhelming potentially with some of that, as far as the results go. But again, you should then see a leveling out once you start to actually address the root cause, come up with strategies to address them. And actually, what you're doing is building a much stronger position, and the health of your system is improving with every single different step that you're taking with that.
And
There's
the,
another yeah, sorry, Pete. There's another question here just in relation to some challenges. So I guess an organisation keen to shift to that 100%. However, some encountering some challenges with the AI's tool ability to access information from native systems for validating checkpoints around regulatory obligations. So interested to hear your insights. And specifically, we've got a lot of members that are within the financial sector, the banking, insurance, superannuation, etc., that have, some pretty hefty regulatory requirements. But I'm sure you've encountered that with other organisations, and there are, ways that it's drawing from and designed to actually identify those checkpoints that are required.
yeah, I mean the key things around sort of financial institutions are where the data is being processed. I think is where most of the concerns that we spoke to customers. So the information, is it going up to a cloud? Obviously, security and those sorts of things around the recording or the data that's being stored. And this is where sort of these systems can be sort of cloud or on-premise based that's there. And more of our financial institutions prefer to keep things inside their own firewall. It's easier for the paperwork that's there. Everyone wants to go to cloud technology, but that's not always possible that's there. But these systems are, processing information. Obviously, for ease of use for the mass market, cloud is the easiest thing to use. However, there are sort of solutions that are in play for on-premise. The core coding can be internal, the processing can be internal. Obviously, when you are doing the data processing, make sure in things that are held within your GPDR statements about how you process data is also key as well. So it's making sure that you will be scoring the conversations and those sorts of things, just making sure that that's disclosed within things like agents contracts, and also within your customer sort of GPDR statements about what you do with their data as well. So the other point that I just want to cover on around sort of this end of it with regards to the last question is that amount and depth of feedback that you're getting. One of the things that I've always said to my customers around that is to expect a lot of feedback. But what you should be doing is to work out a prioritization. And I put that, you know, what we can deal with in 3 months, what we can deal with in 6 months, what we can deal with next year. And that's what, when we find the problems within this area, what you really need to decide is what priority is it, priority 1, 2, or 3 issue. Put it into that bucket, work through your priority 1s, then work through your priority 2s, then work through your priority 3s. Not everything needs to be fixed day one. And that's really what you need to have is get that feedback back, but put it into the different buckets that you want to put it into and tackle it over time. You have the information, you know where the problems are, but you know they were happening anyway. So at least now you've got that pathway forward. And that's really how I would do it, is to phase the project of turning it on, take some time to get it scoring correctly, taking some time to understand the feedback, and then prioritizing the feedback and starting to tackle those problems one at a time. Okay. So just to give you an example of somewhere where we've turned this on, this is a real life Enghouse customer. We will have a case study being published for this one. The customer was 115 agents within there, and they decided to turn on a trial, which I advise everybody does. Dip your toe in the water of 10 agents within the system over a 30-day period. They were manually evaluating 234 evaluations on the 105 agents, so across that 30-day period. On the 105 that weren't being used in the automated evaluation, they did 238 evaluations. Now, a very surprising number was the automated evaluations did nearly 3,500 across those 10 agents in the same time. So you can see the amount of difference that is actually happening, the smaller percentage that they were doing, around about 0.5% of really the evaluations that were possible within the system that's there. So they actually did an increase of 1,900% increase in evaluations, the amount of feedback that they're actually getting. So realistically, in turning the technology on, even for a small number of agents, you can see every conversation is getting that feedback as to what they could manage with the time that they had across the supervisors. And it is a vast difference that's there. And this is where imagine the time that it would take to replicate that in human form. And that's
Pete,
really...
there's a comment here in relation to the feedback, and probably what you've just said. Sorry, my room's just gone dark, so I've disappeared. There we go. I'll fix that in a minute. There's a question here in relation to how the feedback's presented. So again, your case study here, suddenly those 10 agents have every single one of their interactions. I'd be interested to hear how that organisation then approaches feedback, because surely if you suddenly told an agent they are now being given all of this feedback, they'd spend a whole lot of time sitting there looking at it, reading it, understanding it, reviewing it, etc., etc. So, you know, I'm assuming organisations would need to come up with their own internal strategy and approach to what it is that will be, number one, provided back to agents. But there is you know, the numbers themselves are quite overwhelming as far as, you know, I look at that and think, oh my God, imagine those 10 agents. What are they getting? What are they being provided with? But I'm assuming there's some strategic decision making that needs to be sort of worked through as far as the organisation itself, but also then how it's handled.
I mean, if you consider that this evaluation could be 10 questions that are being answered there, Fran, and if you consider that we could have done 3 evaluations on there, we're still getting the same feedback content of how well we're performing as a percentage on those 10 questions. It's just going to be more accurate if we've done it across 3,500 conversations. So the feedback level actually doesn't change that much. It's just the accuracy and the expanse of what you're looking at and basing that feedback on is actually changing. The feedback level itself is identical to doing it in a manual process.
Well,
Does
it's
that make
probably
sense?
a different approach, right? Because I totally agree with what you've just said. But I know a lot
Mm-hmm.
of organizations don't actually give feedback that way. They'll actually give feedback on
Mm-hmm.
the 3 calls that that
Yeah.
person had listened to. Now, actually theming it together makes a whole lot of sense. Again, it would just need to be a different approach to then
Yeah.
fit in with the breadth and scale of data that you have access to now.
Yeah.
So it does actually give you some different positioning as far as how you could strategically deliver it. So
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
thank you. That makes
yeah.
a lot of sense what you said.
I mean, you're going to pick up on things that you haven't seen just doing those couple of evaluations a week, if you like. And it's going to pick up on things that you possibly might not have been seeing before. So there is going to be some additional feedback coming in. But if you think of, you're not spending the time listening to any of these recordings and scoring them anymore, you've got more time to decide how you want that feedback presented to agents. So we've had customers that have created personal dashboards for agents around their percentage, their scoring, so they can see as time goes on what they're doing well, what they're not doing well. Some of them give them access to the evaluation so they can go and listen and review and see how the AI has been scoring them so that they can do some self-learning there. And some of them are holding it back and keeping it at supervisor level and doing it in a one-to-one process. So
Yep.
again, having more time to decide how you want to produce that feedback actually gives you that chance. And some people are scared about showing the agents the feedback
Yeah.
that's there, but in places where it's actually been given in real time, they're not waiting for the one-to-one, so they're getting quicker. The agents that are more um, and they're more sort of curious about what their feedback is and want that improvement. They see it as a challenge. Those type of things get a tie. Some agents just ignore it completely and go, I don't want to know. But you're going to get those people within the business that do want that input as well.
And I'm assuming, Pete, you can set up some internal rules, right? That say, if Fran, if the results show that Fran should actually not be on the phones, that's going to go to my supervisor, who's going to come very quickly and have a conversation with me, as opposed to, not. So I'm assuming that there's ways you can actually build some rules and some opportunities for tailoring how some of those results are actually then delivered.
Yep, and as we'll see a little bit later, what we do is we present sort of those results, if you like, within a customizable feedback. So we use sort of the Microsoft Power BI reports there, which
Yep.
enables them to mix it up with their data as well. So we obviously give some templates around how we think we want the data presented, but you might want to grab certain segments of that to
Mm.
see the feedback. So the outcomes of the case study was sort of going from that 0.5% to that 100% that's there. They obtained new insights into their quality and customer engagement. It showed them problems that they didn't know about within there. It did reduce the labour they spent on that QA section around there. It gave them some more consistency and efficiency and enabled them to do it at scale. They significantly improved their efficiency, within the business, basically from the feedback getting more quickly, if you like, because you're able to react, that whole react to problems quickly. We're getting that feedback that's there. We've got more time to spend with the agents. Therefore, we can change those problems a lot quicker. They actually learned that only 70% of their agents were adhering to the scripting. So again, around that sort of financial checking, whether or not you're compliant or not, they learned quite quickly that they were only, 70% of the way to completing those scripts. A lot of people were going off script or missing things from the script around there. So they might want to look into sort of, more doing some scripting adherence as they're training. Gained positive visibility over their service delivery and reported that 87% of the customer actions scored positively. So again, getting that feedback of the voice of the customer, which we'll cover off in a little bit as well, is also quite key, where you can understand whether that was a positive or a negative interaction. And the good news for us is they adopted the Enghouse AI within the Insight contact centers. They've moved all of their agents across, but starting with that poll enabled them to dip their toe in the water, see some results. Again, coming to that migration. Don't do it en masse, do it in a control set first, get it right, and then spread it across the business. Whether that's to different departments, if you can do it that way, or whether or not you try it with a small section of your team, maybe some of your good agents, some of your trainees, for example, and then sort of breach it out a little bit and unleash it onto the business a little bit at a time. And then that way, phasing it through is a better way to achieve it.
Pete, have you got
So
any anecdotal new learnings that have come out from any of your customers? So something that they hadn't even thought of that they've now seen through introducing this?
yeah, I mean, it's quite a lot of it is surfacing problems that they thought that they didn't have. So it may be just the simple things like people saying, "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" That makes a difference to people. For that checkbox to be seen that that was at 50% at one customer, but they rate themselves and that all of their marketing is very much about their friendliness and their service and they're very that as an ethos as a company. That's what they are. They're a social housing group, if you like,
Mm,
and they always want to say, is there anything else I can help? They have a lot of older people within their generation, and for them to sort of see that that was only being asked 50% of the time, that meant that they could have a whole campaign across their agents to say, this is something that we're going to do points on. They do points equal prizes. So the person that announced it the most or got the 100%, they would get that they may have a pizza voucher or a sports voucher or something like that. They have a weekly prize for their agents there. So something that was shocking to their organisation in feedback was one of them, their key sort of motives for the business wasn't actually happening. They thought they were very good at it, but they actually found out that they weren't. But on other sides, that where they found out that they had very different brands in the UK, a lot of the housing associations, private sort of or non-profit organisations, they're swaring each other up as they grow sort of small ones in small
mm,
areas that they're growing bigger, but they're very brand aware, so they don't change the name. So agents could be answering on 4 or 5 different brands, and their brand was very important to them. Their residents get upset for the wrong brands being used, but they found out they were doing that very well, which is the thing that they
mm,
thought they were doing very badly. So just the weight of what they were doing increased their accuracy to change their perspective. And it's about that doing it by weight gives you the better accuracy of what's really happening, not what you think is happening. And that's really
mm.
the difference that we're talking about.
Cool.
Cool. So let's take a look at how this technology really sort of breaks down. And what we're really talking about is call recording. And some of the people are cautious about call recording. I don't want to record everything. And call recording, within most platforms, you can decide what medias that you want to record. You can decide to do it by rules. Do I do 100% of it? Do I want to add some rules in to say only do it for certain agents, only do it for certain DDIs or telephone numbers that you've got coming into the business? So again, don't feel you have to record everything. It's not that thing. You can usually configure by rules based what you want to record, what you don't want to record. So you could exclude things from a telephone number, certain agents within the business, perhaps certain call types are within there as well. It's also around sort of how much you want to evaluate there. You can not switch on 100% if you want to. You could evaluate a small percentage. So you could have ramped this up over time for that feedback. I would say that most of my customers are turning it on 100% and just getting everything through there. But you may want to, as I say, turn it on for a small team. But I would probably say evaluate everything that you record and translate. And that's really because all of this is really based off of transcription, the ability to be turning the spoken word into text. So we can see the conversation happening here. One of the nice things that you get when you turn transcription on is usually it also turns on what we would call summarization. The call summarization, rather than me having to read all this conversation, it gives me at a glance content. So I can just get a synopsis of what the AI thinks is important about this call. So even if I come in from a dispute one, what was John talking about here? And why did John call into there? Rather than me having to read out all the discussion or listen to the call, I get a brief summary around the key parts of that. So that's again saving me a little bit of time, and that just gets turned on as part of this transcription layer and very easy to use. But I have a lot of customers that really think that's fantastic rather than having to keep listening to 10 minutes to find out what the call is about. So the summarization also works across different media. So we've got an example here of a web chat that's going on, and obviously there's a bulk of information, and it's quite happily just summarized that down for me again. That's a key thing once you're looking at turning that AI on, so able to pick out the pertinent parts of what it thinks the conversation is. And that really is sort of available on your SMS, your web chats, your emails that are there. So if you've got some meaty conversations coming through those text medias or even through your voice, broken down to that nice summary section for you. Once we have all of that information in text, this is really where the AI starts to pick apart that. And really, it's what we're talking about is conversation AI. We've had for many years technology that will be able to pick out individual words. But what we're really doing today is looking at the context of what's being said and then matching that to a question. So this is where the questions in the scorecard, did the agent greet the customer with the company name? Now, that might be a little bit widespread. It may take the AI a little bit of a guess there to try and pick out saying, hello, thank you for contacting Enghouse. So this is again where we may need to tune some of our questions and maybe update that to say, with the company name being Enghouse, to give the AI some more context on how to search. But what really will be happening is the same way that the user has been listening to that, the AI understands what we're asking and then searches through the text-based conversation for that to happen within the call and score that yes or no. Here's the thing, when you turn technology on with these questions, could be ambiguous to the AI. You may get what we would call sort of false positives within the system. So you could get sort of, some conversations where things are happening where you may get a yes or a no that you weren't expecting to that. And sometimes that's where we're spending that time around that transition, making sure that we're getting the right hit roll results around there. So it's not a move to 100% AI, no manual checking. What you have to do is to make sure you spend that manual checking time for the first sort of couple of months doing the tuning there to make sure that the AI is doing what you're expecting it to do. Turning it on and just thinking that's the real feedback is the worst thing that you can do, because you will get a lot of false negatives within there. It doesn't take long to change these. Normally within the first couple of weeks, you have them at a good hit rate. I always say to people, just do some spot checks just to make sure that you're still getting wrong things. You don't really want to go and have negative feedback going into the contact center when actually they've been doing the correct things. So doing that sort of checking is also important. So what that may look like in action is we've got sort of the speech happening over here with my summary here, but I've got my questions here, and we can see what the AI is doing is putting into our spreadsheet. Here's what I believe was the answer to that question and why I marked it yes. So it's actually picking the conversation from the side, dropping it into the question. Obviously, we've got our typical scoring in here and our progress through it. So it's managed to achieve 100% through there, and it's given us a 91% scoring there. So typically people would be listening to this in the manual process and working through these different questions. So what we're really doing is just opening the scorecard up if we want to check an individual one, obviously, and we're getting the immediate feedback of why the AI thought that question was answered correctly or not applicable within there, or did or didn't meet that compliance. So obviously that's important to have that sort of picked out, so it's easy to read, to find out where the yes and the no's are within there and why we believe something was done incorrectly if it has been.
Pete, there's a few questions here in relation to the complexity of questions that can be answered and assessed. Obviously we have got people from a whole lot of different industries and verticals, and sometimes what they're dealing with on the call can be complex, or it can be complicated. Two very different things. So it might be the net effect of a person that creates the complexity, right? So the question from a couple is in relation to, is it able to evaluate complex criteria, not just, did they greet the customer sort of yes, no? Is there kind of some examples you could give, or some industry insights where it is actually assessing things that, people would not necessarily assume it could?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, sort of most people look at doing that sort of single question format. Did it meet this criteria, yes or no? But when you start looking at criteria, you can do what I would call sort of the either or statements in your question.
Yep.
So when you're telling the AI, what you really can say is, did the agent do this or this, or did they do either this or either that? The AI will interpret that as well. So you can sort of search for a wide space where you might have two or three different scenarios that might happen to say that it met the criteria that's there. So you could use the either or type statements within there to look across a more wide space of processes that are happening. Also, when you're looking at it, obviously, because you're not having to spend the time doing the marking, the AI is doing the marking there for you. What you can do is increase, if you like, the
Mm.
number of questions that you're asking. So you may have three questions to say, did you do this, did you do that, or did you do that, rather than doing the either or. And you can get more granular in your results. People have kept these scorecards very, let's say, 10 to 15 questions, if you like, because it takes time for the human to
Yes.
do that. Whereas you could do a broader spectrum of feedback within there. Obviously, you'll take a little bit more time in prepping up your results to you've got a lot more information. So you may want to sort of, change your bar graphs and how you report on that. But you can get into the very, very granular, if you like, as well. So ask more things is basically the feedback. So around those complex areas, ask lots of questions, take lots of feedback. It's going to be how you're going to spend a bit of time in that with that additional information, processing that feedback and getting that into
Interpreting it.
nice, easy to graphs and
Yeah.
things like that.
So again, I think, yeah, that's really good. And I know there are a couple of questions there around, can it do the if then or type
Mhm.
scenario? How
Yeah.
easy and how responsive can organizations have this set up? And by that I mean organizations that see very regular updates to requirements and regulations, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes they can be on a dial, right? They've got to really quickly turn around change. Um, how easily can adjustments be made to what is set in there to, particularly around regulatory reporting requirements?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends, if you like, on where you're at with your contact center and your core recording that's there. For example, if it was one of our cloud-based customers, this is all available within the cloud. It's a question of turning on the transcription. That's just really a few rules within the recording profile, and then turning on the evaluations. If they're already doing the evaluations, is around about that sort of consultation, if you like, of a couple of weeks to look through those questions to get something to go live with on the understanding that you may be getting it 60 to 70% right. So when you're turning that on, then you've got a few weeks, 3 or 4 weeks of maybe tuning that system, if you like. Obviously, the technology can be turned on instantaneously, but it's
Mm.
about getting it right, getting it positive, making a difference. Turning it on is the easy part. The tuning it a little bit, I would probably say, somewhere around that sort of 2 weeks to prep the questions up correctly, do maybe a small pilot around the system. That 30-day pilot is a good example. And that gave them 2 weeks of turning on and tuning it and a couple of weeks of feedback around that as well. So those sorts of projects, I would say 4 to 6 weeks to get something that would be, not bulletproof, but something that is very accurate for you. But you can always this is feedback is going to give us more information that is going to turn into a little bit of a growing cycle, as we'll see that the AI can also surface things you don't expect. So you might want to add more questions, for example, Fran, that dig a little bit deeper, add that if or either statement in there. So there is a little bit of time to get this running to its 100% effectiveness, if you like. But I reckon a good sort of 4 to 6 week project would get you to a point where you're getting good feedback out of the system that's there. It's just getting that initial phase right. It's not a technology deployment problem. It's more of a tuning and getting your questions right, getting that interpretation of what's being spoken to what you want to see as a result.
And for where it would just be a change in, something that needs to be said, that would be a very quick change, I would imagine, because you're
Oh,
not actually
yes.
needing to tweak things. So awesome. There,
Yes.
there are so many questions here, and I'm just going to put out to everybody that's put a question up there. What we will do is actually get Peter to provide a response to each one of those. And when we send
Yeah,
out
sure.
the recording and the slides and all of that, we'll actually include that there for you. So keep them coming. and we will get to them all, but there's been such good conversation going. And it's obviously a topic we could probably do another session on and talk more about, because I think there is so much that people are keen to understand and know. There's something here from Nick in relation to how it's set up with the LLM. So it's talking about, does your language model learn or can it be trained? And if so, how easily managed is that? But the second part of it, do you use one LLM, or is it each business specifically, each business provided their own specific LLM? And yeah.
Yeah, so there are standard language models. So for everybody that may not know what they are, they're basically dictionaries that the AI uses and sort of, how it understands things that are being said. And there are sort of global ones that can be used that refer to as more standard language models that will give you a good hit rate that's there. And then there are ones that you can train on top of that. And by training, what we really mean is you may have certain things like product names or services that you offer that the standard language models may not be capturing in the right way. So what you can do is then add there into the dictionary, if you like. You can add your own custom words and ones. And we do both models. Obviously, the standard models are normally sort of cheaper to use. The actual sort of trainable models are a little bit more expensive. And that really results into this transcription layer is really what we're talking about here. Now, we would use normally we found for our customers that are using it currently that the standard models are good, but we do have the option to move that to a customizable layer that's there. There's an increase in cost when we do that slightly, but we'll do that when it's required. Because there is an uplift in there, we try and keep it as cheap as possible to use the standard ones for most customers, but we do have the option to move into customizable ones where you can build up your own dictionary and library to train it better, if you like, and target it a little bit more specifically.
Excellent.
No problem. So the other things that can surface around this as well, around the AIs, is we've broken the whole conversation down into a conversation, a transcript, if you like, around there. And obviously we're doing the AI, we're asking the system, does this exist? But what we also surface is what we would refer to as the voice of the customer. What are the common things the AI sees that are being mentioned within there? Also, what the emotionality is of that call. So we've got the green, if you like, for the good calls, the red where something was bad. So I'm really annoyed is being picked up within there. So I've received the wrong sizes twice or two separate. So it's picking out the negative and the positives of these conversations. And this is where sort of the customer insights, or the voice of the customer, as we refer to it, really is taking a holistic view, that 1,000-foot view about what's being talked about and why is it being talked about. Are we focused around this? Did we know that this is a problem? So what this may look like is if we take a look here around what the AI is picking out. I've got my staff here. I'm getting very positive feedback around that. I can see the negatives. If I click onto that, it's going to give me the conversations that's picked out regarding that, where it's sort of put them into parts. And it's doing this naturally of saying, I'm going to group it by these more common words. So the system's capable of doing, if you like, word counting. What's the most popular words? And if they are, what are the conversations relating to them? How positive and how negative are they? So as I said to you before, Fran, you're going to end up adding more questions to your list because this might surface out areas that you've never seen before and never thought about adding questions around, and may want to then start digging a little bit more into, well, why aren't we marking that for feedback? Is it about the availability within there? How many are we getting where we don't have things in stock? We want to highlight those. So I'm now not using it to score the agent, if you like. I'm scoring my warehouse because I want to know how many are in stock. I can use a scorecard to go and say, I don't care what the agent said and what the customer service is. How much do we have in stock or out of stock? I can use a scorecard to now score the warehouse. I could score my delivery systems within there. I can score, as we did at a housing association, they send out a lot of contractual repairs to do the plumbing and the watering. how well is that service? How many complaints am I getting on that service? I'm now not looking at the agent. I'm now scorecarding the business delivery of services that we're offering.
And Pete,
So
that
that's
could
a
go
different.
one step further, I'm guessing, in really giving you super rich intel on, your digital strategy, where people are stepping in and out, what's frustrating. So there are, like you say, there are multi facets to how this can be used. It kind of gets me a little bit excited in a really nerdy way. There are, like I said before, there are so many questions here, and I am really mindful of time. Um, because again, there are quite a few questions here saying, are there demos where people can actually, listen to some example calls, and watch and listen, hear the call, watch, kind of what comes out of it. I mean, obviously this isn't something you watch, it happens like that, but
Yeah.
around that evaluation and what it does, and maybe there's an opportunity to set something up, where people can either we get you to do a recording on some of the rest of this and actually address some of the questions, maybe, that we can make available to people. Maybe that's an option,
Yeah,
because
I
we
mean,
have just
certainly
hit 1 o'clock.
we can do some videos at some point, Fran, and I'm more than happy to come back and do a in motion demonstration for people.
Yeah.
And so feel free to reach out if anybody wants to watch this in motion or ask more individual questions. Well, I'm happy to spend time. That's my life in pre-sales, is talk to customers about what they can do and how they do it.
Yep. No, I think that's good. There's lots of people that are going to have to start dropping off. So I guess
Mhm.
from you, Pete, and for everyone still on, we will absolutely set something up. We'll work with Pete, and the team, and come up with something that we can, advertise, and we'll send back out to all of you that have come along to this, because it's such an interesting topic, and it's so rich as far as what it can add to your business. But clearly there's so much that people want to learn more about. So I guess, Pete, I know there's a few things you still wanted to cover off, but are there kind of some high level elements that you'd like to push through? We'll get you to do the responses to the questions that have come in there.
Yeah,
But
sure.
we'll look to set something up, because every person here is just like, yep, fantastic, let's do it type thing. So are there kind of some high level takeaways that you want to leave people with before we wrap up for today?
Well, I think the takeaways is around sort of, speeding up the time is really the first gain that you're going to get, and being able to do what you do today more en masse. But don't have a closed mind with this, with the things like the voice of the customer, finding those other topics, finding processes, not like checking how often you have things out of stock. Think about evaluating the business rather than evaluating just the human in the chair and the process that's doing. You'll be able to evaluate some of those processes by looking at the conversation that's happening between people. So you might be able to score areas of the business that don't work in the contact center. And that evidence is power, especially when you're working and complaining that you're working in sales, but you never have anything in stock. That can obviously affect your commission, for example. So there's a lot of feedback that the system can get that people don't expect that day.
Excellent. And I think you're right. The richness of what you can then use this for, to support the rest of your organization, not just the contact center, and, building, stronger agents and better processes and all those things that come from a really solid and strong QA. The sky's kind of the limit as far as how it can influence others, as far as the richness of what it's telling you. And again, being able to build that into, a program that gives you both benefits,
Mm.
is really exciting, I think, for organisations. We will have to call it there, just because I know a lot of people have had to drop off to attend their next meetings. Pete, thank you so much. I know, a
You're
big
very
ask.
welcome.
You're technically still on leave, but we've loved having you join us today. Again, the importance of having, access to experts for our members, is our constant, assurance and commitment. So thank you. We'll put our heads together and, work out, what's next, so we can make sure that, we build on and leverage, the insights you've shared today, but actually finish it off and give people more, because clearly they want it. So thank you so much for today. It's been great
You're very
having you.
welcome.
Everybody enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Obviously it's a super topical conversation, and we'll keep it going. So watch this space. We'll get something out to you next week, with slides and the recording, but also the follow-up to all of those questions that have been asked. Fantastic participation, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for your time all.